Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So on my core plays for week 10 of the NFL season over on Draftkings. Also, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate that. And YouTube tells me that around 50% of the people watching these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor of the channel, or if you're new and you like what you see, considering that subscribe button really helps the channel grow, and I do appreciate it. If you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel, links down below for my Patreon. You get access into the entire NFL DFS data sheet, projections, cheat sheet, notes, and my Discord chat. So if you're interested, links down below. If not, that's totally fine. Let's just dive into today's video. Alright, leading off with core play number 1, it's no other than Aaron Jones at $7,100. This should be no surprise here. I've been beating the Aaron Jones drum all week long. I just simply think he's underpriced. I think he should be close to $8,000. And with all the value we have on this slate, it's going to be really easy to fit him in. So I am all in on getting Aaron Jones in my lineups. He's going to be the first guy I plug in this week. That's why I have him here first. But everything sets up well for Aaron Jones. It's a good matchup. It's good Vegas-wise, and also the weather is going to help the run game. So first of all, they're playing Jacksonville, and they have a team total just below 31 this week. They're also 13.5-point favorites at home, which always sets up well for a running back. In the matchup versus Jacksonville, they're 27 versus running backs, bottom half of the league DVOA-wise versus the run, and they're allowing nearly 30 DraftKings points per game to the position. So I'm all about Aaron Jones here. And also, it's supposed to be very, very windy here, which might put a bit of a damper here on the passing game, meaning that the Packers might go towards a more run-heavy approach, which would obviously help out Aaron Jones. But he's going to be involved in the passing game as well. He's got just below a 20% target share in the season, so I really have nothing bad to say about Aaron Jones this week. I don't think there's really any negative that you could say. Maybe just since they're about 14-point favorites at home, this game gets out of hand. They get more volume to Jamal Williams and guys like that. But even then, Aaron Jones should be totally fine here. He's underpriced. It's a great matchup, and game flow wise, this sets up perfect for him. So he's gonna be the first guy I'm jamming in my lineups this weekend. Alright, and core play number 2 and the first wide receiver we're going to talk about. And I went back and forth on this all week because there's a lot of good wide receivers in this like mid 7K, upper 6K range. But I landed on Stephon Diggs here at 7,500 just because I absolutely love this game from a fantasy perspective. And I know the price is up there at $7,500, but he is having a fantastic season. He has not scored less than double-digit points in the game this year. And like I said, this game should be absolutely fantastic for fantasy. There's going to be a lot of high-owned plays in this game, so you're definitely going to want exposure to it in your main lineup and in cash games, unless you want to get crazy and fade it, which is definitely a strategy. But man, there's just so many good plays here. But we have a 56.5-point over-under, which is tops on the entire slate. And it's only about a 3-point spread here. So I expect fireworks, and it should be back and forth for the most part. And it's a 4 p.m. game, and I always like getting exposure to 4 p.m. games, although there's quite a bit of those this week, unlike other weeks. But Diggs, he's having a fantastic year. Just about 10 targets per game, just slightly below 100 receiving yards per game, about a 30% target share. In the matchup versus the Cardinals, I wouldn't say it's a super soft matchup, but they are ranked 20th versus wide receivers, which is bottom half in the league, but they're also 11th EV versus the pass. So I wouldn't say it's an absolute cakewalk here, but I'm expecting a lot of points to be scored. And Stephon Diggs, I would not be surprised if he gets us 20, 30-some points because he's been having a great year. He's a super talented wide receiver. The volume's going to be there. Josh Allen's not afraid to chuck the ball deep, so I'm definitely liking Stephon Diggs here, and he's one of my favorite plays in the 7K range. There's a lot of good plays here. Like we have Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Metcalf, Diggs, Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, which you might see later on in this video, Terry McLaurin, Will Fuller. There's just so many good plays here, so it's hard to pick one. But I'm going to play my flag here on Stephon Diggs just because I love this game environment here. Alright, in core play number 3, it's our second running back we're going to talk about, but it's Duke Johnson at $5,000, and this is one of the reasons why it's going to be really easy to fit in Aaron Jones this week, or even Devontae Adams if you so choose to do so, or even Stephon Diggs, who we just talked about previously, because then we have another 4K running back coming up in a little bit, so there's a lot of value in this slate. But Duke Johnson, he is going to be the starting running back for the Texans this week because David Johnson has been ruled out with a concussion, and that means Duke Johnson should get around 20 touches in this game, and last week he had 16 carries, got into the end zone, and he had a handful of targets as well. So I'd expect a similar workload here. And if you guys like a good narrative, he's facing his old team, the Cleveland Browns. Not sure how much he cares about facing his old team, but it's always nice to have a good narrative as well. So we could look at his per game numbers this year, but I feel like that's a waste of time because he has not been the starting running back besides the last week after David Johnson went out. So let's look at what David Johnson's done this season just to try to paint a picture of what his role could be. So Johnson, about 13 13 carries. 13 carries per game this season, and he had a target share of 9%. So if you give Duke Johnson of his regular target share so far this season, which is about 8.5%, if you combine those two, it's close to 20%. Not saying he's going to have a 20% target share here, but one thing that's going to work in his favor is that it's supposed to be super, super windy for the Browns game, meaning it's going to be hard to pass the ball downfield. So there could be quite a bit of checkdowns here to Duke Johnson, and we know he's a good pass-catching running back, so I think this is a fantastic spot for him. Now, the Browns are not the worst team in the world versus the run. They're much worse versus the pass, but they're pretty much mid-pack, so this is a good spot for Duke Johnson. They are 18th DVA versus the run, but allowing the 14th fewest points per game to running backs. But that's not something that's going to scare me off too much. And at $5,000, if he gets around 20 touches, I have a hard time seeing him not hit value, especially if he gets his way into the end zone. All right, in core play number 4, we have the free square of the week, and it's going to be the third running back we're talking about. And like I said, guys, there's a lot of value here at the running back position. We have Duke Johnson at 5K. He's going to be in a starting role here. And Mike Davis with Christian McCaffrey out, he's going to be in a starting role where he should see around 20 touches at the bare minimum for running backs, $4,000. So I don't really have to do much explaining here. I think you guys know that Mike Davis is going to be a good play with CMC out. I mean, we saw that earlier in the season where Mike Davis was having a fantastic stretch of games. Now, the few games right before Christian McCaffrey came back, Mike Davis was struggling a little bit, and he wasn't as involved in the passing game. But we saw multiple games early on where he had like 8, 9, even 10 targets. On that game versus Atlanta, he had around 30 fantasy points, absolutely crushed versus them. And I mean, I know it's a tough matchup versus Tampa Bay. They are third DVA versus the run, and they're only allowing the 12 fewest points per game to running backs, and like 55 rushing yards per game. But the thing about Tampa Bay is they're actually giving up close to 7 catches per game to running backs and about 50 receiving yards per game, which is kind of right in Mike Davis's wheelhouse because this team loves to get the ball to their running backs through the air. And Mike Davis at $4,000, if he can get us a handful of catches and get us around 50, 60 receiving yards and throw in like 50, 70 on the ground, hopefully get into the end zone, he's going to be a pretty good play at $4,000. And I would expect him to be, I'm not going to say he's going to be 100% on cash games because people are just, I mean, there's going to be some people that just won't play him, but he should be like 75, 80, maybe even 90% on cash games this week, depending on the size of your contest. If you're in the huge ones, it'll be a little bit lower, but if you're like in a few hundred people or like 1,000, he's going to be super high owned. So it's not going to matter what he does anyway. He's just your free square to be able to afford more expensive players like Aaron Jones, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams this week. So don't have to do much explaining here. He's just the free square at $4,000. And my fifth and final core play, which I guess will actually be the fifth, sixth, and seventh core plays here, is because I'm cheating a little bit because I want to talk about all these guys, but they're in the same game, so I grouped them together. But I love these Rams and Seahawks wide receivers, and I'm having a hard time making lineups without at least one of these guys because they're both in great spots here. And well, I wouldn't say Tyler Lockett's in the greatest spot in the world. It's mainly just a price play, and he's got Russell Wilson throwing the football. But let's talk about Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods first, because I kind of view these guys as the same exact plays. They get similar work each and every single week. Now, Cooper Kupp's numbers are a little bit inflated from last time they played, where he had 20 targets in that game because Jared Goff threw the ball over 60 times. But still, these guys, I mean, they have similar numbers on the season, but I love this game from a fantasy perspective. It's the second best on the slate, right behind that Bills and Cardinals game. This one's at a 54.5 point over-under, only a 2.5 point spread, and the Rams have a team total of 28.5 this week. In Seattle, you want pass-catching options versus Seattle, and you want quarterbacks versus Seattle. So I'm all about these Jared Goff, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods stacks, and you can always run that back with Tyler Lockett as well. It's not that hard to fit all of those guys in. I know they're all in the 6K range, but with all the value we have on the slate, like I mentioned before with Duke Johnson, Mike Davis, and there's a couple of really cheap wide receivers like Grant, he's $3,000, and some other guys as well. So should be no issue trying to build whatever lineup you want this week. But Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. So Seattle, they are dead last versus wide receivers. They're also dead last versus quarterbacks. But if you want to know the specific numbers of what Seattle is doing or giving up to the wide receiver position this year, it's kind of insane. 63.2 points per game to wide receivers, which is obviously dead last in the league. They're 29th DVA versus the pass. These are some historic numbers. They are just awful. Allowing close to 300 receiving yards per game just to the wide receiver position. Like, that is just such an insane number. It's almost hard to believe these numbers. Almost 2 touchdowns per game to wide receivers. So Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, I think they're both capable of having some pretty big games here. Both have really nice wide receiver versus cornerback matchup advantages this week over on PFF. So I don't think you can really go wrong with either of them. Personally, if I had to pick one, my lean all week long has been Robert Woods, and also Cooper Kupp is a bit banged up. Not like he's going to really have any limitations in this game at all, but just Woods is a little bit cheaper, and I don't know, I'm just having a nice lean on Robert Woods here, but both are fantastic plays. Cooper Kupp's got a 26% target share in the season, meanwhile Robert Woods is right about 20%. So Kupp's been getting some more targets overall this year, but they're both very similar plays. They don't get the ball down deep. Woods' ADOT is 8.2, Kupp's is 7.1. They're both kind of possession wide receivers for the most part, but such a good matchup versus Seattle, and it should be back and forth for the most part. And I like these price tags too. I know they're kind of expensive at 66 and 6,900, but they should be above 7K in this matchup versus Seattle. So definitely like this entire game with all the wide receivers. And then on the flip side, we have Tyler Lockett at $6,500. Now I'm probably gonna get burned again for the third or fourth time in a row, but Tyler Lockett, he still gets volume every single week, and he's certainly capable of these huge games. We saw it versus Dallas in Week 3 where he scored 3 touchdowns on 100 yards. Then that game versus Arizona, which was either 3 or 4 games ago, I cannot remember. I think it's 4 games ago if you include the upcoming week here in Week 10. But he had 200 yards, had 20 targets, had 3 or 4 touchdowns. It was absolutely insane, over 55 DraftKings points. So he's capable of these big games, but he's certainly capable of not scoring over double-digit points. So you got to keep that in mind. DK Metcalf is obviously the better wide receiver here, but he's $7,700, and it's just, or not $7,700, he's $7,600, which I can get Lockett for about $1,000 cheaper, actually just a little bit more than $1,000 cheaper, and they should see similar volume. So I'm going to side with Lockett once again. I'll probably get burned, but he's only $6,500. He's seeing close to 9 targets per game. He's got about a 25% target share. Now, the matchup versus the Rams, it's not that good. They've been very stingy versus wide receivers overall, allowing the second fewest points per game to the position in their 10th DVA versus the pass. But Metcalf overall should see more attention from the defense. He's been more consistent this season, and I'd expect him to see a good bit of Ramsey. Now, I know Ramsey said on Twitter that he is not going to full shadow DK Metcalf. We'll see how that goes. But in the slot, Tyler Lockett does actually have a pretty good wide receiver versus cornerback matchup advantage versus Troy Hill this week. And overall, he's going to see the softer coverage. Now, the defenses aren't just going to forget about Tyler Lockett, but $6,500 with Russell Wilson throwing you the football, and he should get close to double-digit targets. It's really hard to pass up at $6,500, even though he has burned us the past few weeks. But overall, I love all 3 of these wide receivers. You could throw DK Metcalf in there as well. I just feel like he's a bit overpriced, but the guy's awesome. I can't dispute that. But for $100 more, you can get DeAndre Hopkins, or for $100 less, you can get Stephon Diggs. So that's kind of why I left him off, but definitely like all 3 of these mid-range wide receivers quite a bit. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. If you want to follow me on social medias, the handle's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you want to support the channel over on Patreon, links down below for that. Obviously, I always appreciate the Patreon supporters. And if you have any questions, you can always hit me up in Discord as well, or you can leave comments on the YouTube video too. So that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoy the games tomorrow, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which should be the Monday Night Football Showdown video.